Welcome to the BigBandology podcast. I'm Eric Dragney, and this is part 4 of Building the Big Band. You can have the bestest musicians, the most awesomest stand fronts, and the absolute coolest band name and logo. But if you ain't got nothing to play, you ain't got nothing to say. The music a big band performs is the communication source to its audience. It also helps define the character of and create an identity for the group. The collection that is used to select music for a performance is known as the library, and there are never two that are exactly the same. We discuss what makes up the library, tips and tricks on building one, and how it feeds into creating the book. All that coming up. When you're in a big band, you play charts. A chart can be an original composition or arrangement of another tune done by a writer. It's a framework that guides musicians from a starting point to an end point and helps them to play together. It tells them what's happening, what to play, and when not to play. When a band leader starts a big band, they're going to need charts. The goal is to have a collection of enough charts to play a gig. A gig may be made up of 2 separate sets with a break in the middle. It may be one long set. It just depends. The reason why I started the Building the Big Band series talking about bass, lead trumpet, and drums is because if those 3 players are very strong and are leaders, it makes it much easier for a band leader to pick charts. With a bass player and a drummer that know a variety of styles and feels, are good readers, listen to each other, work well together, and create a solid pocket, adding in the chording instruments like piano and bass is slightly easier. For the brass section, there are lots of charts out there that can be very taxing and demanding for the lead trumpet. If the other players in the section are strong but don't necessarily have the range and stamina, they can work to complement each other. This is also a very familiar formula for the trombone section. The sax section has an entirely different set of skills that may be needed because of things like woodwind doubling and even playing other saxophones based on how a chart is written. You'll see in a lot of cases the lead alto saxophonist that has to play soprano sax, but there will be more on this later. A band leader cannot assume or infer that every person in their band can play every chart they have. If there's not someone who can carry the trumpet feature chart, you can't play it. Each of the strengths as well as the limitations of the players involved with each performance needs to be considered and worked with when the music is being selected. When charts get purchased and then put together in folders for each of the musicians, that creates what is known as the book for that band member. Also, and only slightly confusing, all of the folders used by the band collectively is also referred to as that band's book. As an example of this, I play the bass trombone book in the Sketch Anderson Orchestra. If somebody asks me if there's a specific chart in everybody's folder, they'll ask me if that chart is in the Sketch book. The book may only represent a fraction of the music that is available for the band to play. That other collection of music that's not in the book is called the library. The library is the lifeblood of a band, any band really. Just like the local public library, the library for the band is a resource. It's available so the group can have a wide range of material to work with. Once you've started building the library, the book that the band plays becomes a subset of your available material. Building a library takes time, knowledge, ideas, vision, and lots of effort. Back in 1984, my good friend Mike Camiff and I started a hobby of buying big band charts because we thought they'd be cool to have. We didn't have a band yet. We were in high school. We played in our high school jazz bands, and we loved the music so much that we wanted to have our own copies. What we did, without knowing it, was start our own version of the library to pull charts from. That led us to starting our first big band in 1985. There were a lot of musical bumps and bruises for us early on. We had charts that we loved to listen to and really wanted to play, but the difficulty level of the music was way beyond what the high school musicians in our band could do. Many of the pieces we had were pro-level charts played by the best bands out there. We had to go back out and start looking for some things that were not as demanding, that we also liked and thought sounded good. That way we could do a few of those big nasty pieces and use the other pieces to fill out our set and not kill everyone in the band. How could we do that? Well, we had to go back to the different catalogs that we had from publishing companies like C.L. Barnhouse, Hal Leonard, Kendor Music, and Jensen Publications. Some of those catalogs had thin, square plastic records that included a sample recording of some of the newest charts that they had published. Some also sent cassette tapes with samples. That helped a lot. What also happened is that it made us appreciate something that they used known as the grading system. Although there's still not a totally standardized scale, Each publishing company has a method they use to tell their customers what the difficulty is for a chart they publish. This is usually based on things like how wide the range is for the brass section, especially lead trumpet, how technical the passages are for the sax section, how harmonically difficult it is for the rhythm section, how complex the rhythms are, what the speed or tempo of the piece is, and what are the overall demands on the players that will perform it. The grading system that I learned early on was the Kendor method. They used grades of 1 being very easy, then 1.5, 2, 2.5, and so forth, up to 6+. Not 6.5, 6+. I was really curious why they used a plus instead of a half as their top grade. What I realized that the plus was basically the catch-all for all the charts that were so hard they didn't want to extend the grading system any further. I found a recording of that dreaded chart with a 6+ grade. It was an original tune written by pianist Toshiko Akiyoshi for her big band that she ran with her husband, saxophonist Lou Tabakin. It was called Strive for Jive, and it sounds a little something like this. Now, I don't care who you are, but anyone that listens to that can tell that is not easy to play. Charts with grades of 4.5 and up were what we had bought. These were also usually considered pro-level charts. Of course, we knew it, but until we had a band to give it to, we may not have been as aware of the impact of this. Before we could decide on what we needed to add to our library, we had to step back and think about the abilities of all the players in our group. We thought about what the reading level of everyone was and how it related to the Kendor grading system, who the players were that could improvise and what chairs they played, how fast could the rhythm section play comfortably, and could the saxes also double or also play flute, clarinet, or bass clarinet parts if they were written. Then it got into the ideas of programming. Did we have any fast swing tunes? What classic tunes did we have? Did we have ballads, rock tunes, Latin tunes, fun tunes that we just wanted to play? Did we have arrangements based on melodies the audience would know? The list just got longer. For the holes that we now realized we had in our library, we had to target charts that were out there that not only sounded good to us, but also filled the need. The challenge back then was, how do we review charts and make decisions without hearing them? How could we look at them without having to buy them? We weren't band directors. We didn't have any type of credit accounts with these companies. Using trial and error was way too expensive a process. Fortunately, we had a resource called the Educator's Music Sheet Music Annex, located in Lakewood, Ohio. The annex was an entire store of printed music. Many of the new jazz band charts that were published were part of their regular stock. When Mike and I would go there, it was one of the coolest things for me, because I'm a big band chart nerd. What I didn't realize was the education I was getting through the research we would do. At first, I just looked for charts with cool names like Uncle Heavy's Pork Chop Review, or Catching the Sun, or the Overture to the Royal Mongolian Sumo Foosball Festival. They sounded cool, so they must be good charts. Actually, they were great charts. Spending hours just looking at and then going back and listening to as many of those charts as I could helped me to understand what would work for the bands that I was in, and in the future, the bands that I would run. There really was no substitute for the time spent and the research done. By the summer of 1985, that first big band, the North Coast Wind Machine, shout out to Sammy Nestico, had played a few gigs around town, including the Seven Hills Home Days, a concert at St. Leo the Great Elementary School, and even a wedding reception for one of the faculty members from Padua High School. We had our first working band, we had a book, and we had a library. From there, the library continued to grow. Between purchases, donations, and new compositions from people like Mike Kamuth and other friends, I had about 300 to 400 charts in the late 90s and early 2000s. In 2020, I cannot honestly say for sure how many charts are exactly in my library. I continue to purchase things, and somehow I also wind up with charts from people. Every big band I've been involved with as a leader or a musical director has a different voice and feel. That's the power and the magic of the library. The quality that can provide to the band leader and musical director is a feeling of fearlessness. You can choose anything you want. All you have to do is have the confidence enough to bring it to the band. From 2012 to 2018, I ran the True North Big Band. Most of the music that band played was different than what I choose for the Sketch Anderson Orchestra. My original plan was to do maybe 4 to 6 concerts throughout the year as a concert series, and that way we could feature certain themes or certain ideas. That never really happened because the performance hall that was shared in the venue where we rehearsed was always busy with rehearsals and performances of musicals that were going on throughout the year. This meant I was going to have to kind of change my original approach. Most of the music that band played was different than what I choose for the Sketch Anderson Orchestra. The talent level, personalities, workload, and expectation is totally different. We wound up doing a lot of swing dances because I had a trumpet player that was a Glenn Miller Band alumnus. He was also a vocalist, so we could do a lot of Sinatra. One of the true highlights was when we did a concert of all Thelonious Monk compositions for his 100th birthday. Those were great performances, and the band really latched onto them and had a good time when we did them. In late 2019, I had an entirely new experience of taking over as the leader of the legendary Dan Zola Orchestra. Dan ran his group for almost 60 years until his retirement at the end of 2019. When I took over, Dan gave me his entire library. More than anything else, the DZO library defines what that band was, is, and will continue to be. Members of the band have come and gone, but the library will always dictate the spirit and the energy of what the Dan Zola Orchestra has been for its entire existence. Again, there are things in that book that I've played in other bands, but I could never take that exact library and superimpose it on another group. It just wouldn't fit the same way. These days I have such a wide array of things to choose from in my library, I'll bring things out that even I'm not familiar with. Sometimes you just gotta bring something and see if it works. Some things will, some things won't. The most important part of the process is to try things and see what happens. I've brought charts out to the SAO that have been great, but no matter how hard we try, they just didn't fit right with the group. Maybe things were shaky, or somehow, even after many times playing them, the performances were still sloppy or hesitant. We can talk all day about grading systems, and they're immensely helpful, especially when first starting out, but sometimes a chart just may not fit a particular band. It could be the timing, it could be the personnel. It doesn't mean that you never play it again. It just means that it may not work at that certain time. I do want to touch on the grading systems just a little bit towards the end here. Grading a big band chart is not an exact science. I have one example of a chart that I want to include here that baffled me from early on. The grade it was given in the Kendor catalog was a grade 3. To translate, that should tell you that the brass ranges are accessible to most players in late middle school and high school levels. The technical demand is also limited. If you go by the grade, you could have a middle school band play this chart. Under no circumstance would I ever consider that. In fact, I would probably give it close to a grade 5 or 5.5. Let me play it for you, and I'll explain why afterward. That was the end of a piece entitled First Love Song, written by valve trombonist Bob Brookmeyer for the Mel Lewis Jazz Orchestra in 1980. It is a gorgeous piece of music. To analyze it using a grading method, Kendor is exactly right. The piece, for the most part, is not much more than moving quarter notes. You do need a piano player that can improvise, and in this case, it would actually be beneficial if they had a strong background in classical playing. The brass ranges are very manageable. Looking at the score, you'll find that all the sax parts have woodwind doubles. You can work with this because there are substitute sax parts included. So what's the problem? The problem is in the harmonies and harmonic structure. Every beat is a different and densely scored chord. For young players, they may not know what certain notes even are, like F flat in the fourth trombone part, along with the extensive written low range down to low C. Tuning is hard enough for triads and four-note chords for young players. Brookmeyer's chords feature the chordal extensions on every beat. As a band director, I would have very little hair left after ripping it out trying to tune every single beat. Not to even mention that the students in my band would want me fired for subjecting them to musical water torture. That's why, personally, I would not give this to a band that plays a typical grade 3 piece. Let me just say, Bob Brookmeyer is one of my favorite all-time composers, and First Love Song is a hauntingly beautiful piece of music that has a melody filled with emotion and melancholy someone can relive when remembering their first love. I performed it many times, and it's always moving in a very good way with the right band. The moral is, just because a piece has a grade attached to it, it doesn't mean it is definite. You as the band leader know your group better than anyone. Chart grading is more like a tool to get you into the ballpark. If you'd like some suggestions about things that I think are great examples of each of the different grades, send me a note. I may even consider doing a listening episode or provide a YouTube playlist for you to check out. Fortunately, with the internet these days, you can do a lot of online searching for big band charts. Some of the really good sites that I recommend are ejazzlines.com, Kendor Music, CL Barnhouse, Sierra Music, Hal Leonard, and Alfred Music. There are a lot more great companies out there. Just do a Google search on big band published music and you'll hit a lot of them. My final thoughts I want to leave you with about the library are this. If you are starting your own big band and are looking for charts to create and build your library, keep in mind that now more than ever, there's an unbelievable amount of music out there that is available. You can look through the publishers, or you can contact people directly. The common theme for everything is to make sure you do a lot of listening and see what works for you. The band you start with will not be the band you wind up with. Things change and grow. To grow your group's voice, find things that you like, but also make sure that the group enjoys playing most of what you choose. You'll never make everyone happy all the time. If you're taking over a school program or another band, make sure you do your homework. Go through the current library, find the recordings, listen to them, and see if you can figure out why certain pieces were played for certain concerts. Your knowledge of those things can help create a nostalgia or a connection to the past, as well as help you to find out what the current students or members like playing or want to play. Finally, if you have your own band, a deep knowledge of the libraries of many big bands, and want to include their charts in your library, you probably don't need my help. You already know this stuff. The important thing to remember is that the new music you add to a library will be your contribution to a band's history and voice. Be confident and proud in what you choose to be your place in the process of building the big band through the library. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and it gave you some ideas about some of the experiences I had while I built my library and collected charts over the years. If you want to hear more things that I have, you can do that every Monday night by tuning into the Sketch Anderson Orchestra, Cleveland's best Monday night big band. You can hear from them on Facebook Live at 8 p.m. Eastern every week for one set of great modern big band music. You can follow the band on Twitter at SAO Jazz, on Instagram at SAO Big Band, and if you can, swing by the Patreon page at www.patreon.com/SAO Big Band to show your support. The BigBandology podcast is also sponsored by BAC, the Best American Craftsman. makers of my custom bass trombone and Model 4 tenor trombone. BAC, get in the loop. Next week we talk about another aspect of building the big band. We look at the chairs that anchor the bottom of the brass and sax sections, the baritone sax and the bass trombone. Until then, I'm Eric Drigney. Thanks for checking in, be safe, and keep swinging.